Here are 4 ways that we miss God's presence in our life. Recently, I was reading Joshua chapters 1 through 4. Go read it. But here's the quick version. Moses is dead. Joshua was Moses' number 2 guy, and he was like a doer. He got things done, and God called him to be the leader of his people. Well, the first task that he had was to cross the River Jordan into the promised land and take all 3 million followers, all 3 million Israelites, men, women, and children into the promised land. And when he did it, and he did it successfully because God did something amazing by stopping the river from flowing at flood stage, and they walked across on dry ground. It was a little reminiscent of the Red Sea being crossed from Moses, but God promises that he will be with him wherever he goes. I don't know about you, but sometimes I want God's presence in my life. And I read these passages like Joshua 1:9 saying, and I will go with you wherever you go. Be strong and courageous. Don't be discouraged. I'm going to go with you wherever you go. And that's what I want. And that's what I miss sometimes in my life. But why do we miss this? So here are 4 things that helped me as I read this story, lessons that I learned from Joshua as we go through. And the first one is this: to be unavailable. You see, Moses had died, and God called Joshua to the next level. He called him a little bit deeper into his leadership, into his walk with Christ. And just like a squat rack or walking into Chick-fil-A or pulling into Chick-fil-A on a Sunday, you become acutely aware of the unavailability when something is inquired about. How many times has God asked me to take that next step into reading his Bible every day, or into taking that next step in baptism or whatever it is? And because of the inquiry, we now are acutely aware of our unavailability. Regardless of what we think about ourselves, we can easily make ourselves unavailable to God. We see Joshua didn't make himself unavailable. He said, God, I don't necessarily get it. I might have chose something different, but I am here for you. I am going to accept the availability and make myself fully available to what you would have for me to do, because I believe that your presence will go with me. The second way that we can do this, second way we can miss God's presence in our life, is be in a rush. As soon as God told Joshua what to do, he didn't immediately spring into action. He waited for 3 days. He waited for 3 days. He was commanded to not only wait, right? He was commanded to not only lead and described what the promised land was for the people, but when God was talking with him, when his presence was there, he said, don't neglect to read this book. Let everything that comes out of it be, let everything that comes out of your mouth be from my word. He said, spend time with it, digest it, spend time with that. And that digestion is key, because waiting on God is not a waste of time. Don't be in a rush to just do the next thing. Feel free to flesh out what God is doing in your life. Feel free to demonstrate and to digest what he's saying. And a lot of times I know I get into a rush. Is like, listen, if God said it, has to happen right now. The only thing that Joshua was not in a rush for is to obey God, is to display his obedience. So don't be in a rush. The more time we spend with God, the more time we spend in the Bible and in prayer, the more we are able to recognize what his presence actually looks like in our life. The third way we oftentimes miss God's presence in our life is we end up being autonomous or self-reliant. We can easily rely on ourselves. And listen, self-reliance is great. But you know what the problem with self-reliance is? You learn to rely on yourself. This is great until you need to rely on someone or something else, right? If you're doing your work and you're putting your effort in and you're doing everything to where you are self-reliant, that is awesome until God calls us to something else, right? This feat of crossing the Jordan wasn't a small deal, right? It was huge. It was 2 miles wide, 120 feet deep, and getting 3 million people across it. Man, that was absolutely a feat of it would be a feat of ingenuity. And because Joshua was such a doer, he was such a military mind, my guess is he was really thinking of, how can we do this? Yet he didn't try to build a bridge, or he didn't try to build a boat where God wanted to bestow a blessing. And so when I oftentimes miss God's presence is whenever I'm relying on myself. God has called me to do something. I've said yes. I was available to him. I've taken my time to devise a plan, but I don't want to miss an opportunity for God's presence to be with me and for me to walk across dry ground. I don't want to miss a blessing because I was trying to build a boat. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing is this: The fourth thing is be forgetful. You see, when Joshua left and he crossed the Jordan River, God gave him a command to actually build a memorial so that they could remember what God's presence was with, or that God's presence was with them. It wasn't a suggestion. It says, listen, when your kids ask about this, when you see this, you can remember what's going on. And I know a lot of times God has been faithful in my life, and I've just completely forgotten about it. It's not intentional. It's nothing that I'm choosing to do, but I've just forgotten about it. So what are the memorials that we are building to jog our memories? What are the memorials that we are putting in our path? What are the pictures that we're taking? What are the things that we're doing to remember those times where God was present in our life? So if you don't want to miss God's presence in your life, I'd encourage you to check these 4 things and see if maybe you have slipped into some of them, and that is the reason that you are missing God's presence, because God's presence is promised to us. God's presence isn't dependent on whether or not we feel it or not. God promises that he will be with us, and he is with us. The question is, are we just missing what's right in front of our face? Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you are able to experience God's presence in a brand new way. Peace.